Welcome to We Build Great Apartment Communities, the only show dedicated to the process and strategies for transforming apartment buildings to thriving communities. I am your host, John Brackett, and welcome to the show. All right, folks, welcome to another great episode of We Build Great Apartment Communities, the only place where you come to learn how to take apartment buildings and turn them into amazing communities. I am your host, John Brackett. Welcome to the show. We have another great guest, and I want to make sure I pronounce this name correctly, okay? This time I'm going to get it right. Adapia D'Errico.
Adapia D'Errico, but
Adapia D'Errico.
It's a really good try.
I totally butchered that. Okay, Adapia D'Errico.
Yes.
Gosh darn it. You know, I don't know why that's such a tongue twister for me. I think I've said that now about maybe 15 to 20 times. But hey, welcome to the show. This is going to be an exciting one and really excited to have you on. So I'm going to introduce you to our audience, okay? So Adapia D'Errico is a visionary leader with 20 years of experience across countries, cultures, and both corporate and startup environments, I think, which is really cool. And she's co-founded multiple businesses, launched brands, and redefined industries. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. A respected thought leader, entrepreneur, and female executive, she is a principal and the VP of strategy for Alpha Investing, which is a private equity real estate firm. So she is also a leadership facilitator, power keynote speaker, author of Productive Intuition, her new book, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. Connecting to the subtle. So Adapia is passionate about empowering at all levels, from intuitive to financial. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. So, hey, welcome to the show. Super excited to have you on.
Thank you.
Let's start by, sharing with us why or how you got into private equity. So maybe talk a little bit about your background, your story, and transition into, the private equity piece. I think that's cool.
Sure. So I want to take it back to when I was younger. So I got into finance when I was 18. So I was pretty independent as a kid. I always have been. And I figured if I could be financially independent, nobody could tell me what to do. Fundamentally, that's really what I was after, right? I was precocious.
I like you added the fundamentally at the end.
It's a really important thing to me. Don't tell me what to do.
That's good.
And I figured it out. And I understood also that I guess at a young enough age, I understood something about the system and working within the system, and finance being a huge part of the system. So I actually got all my securities licenses when I was 18, started working in a bank. I really just wanted to be successful and make people proud. And so I started my career there. I had a bit of a zigzag career. I lived in Europe for 11 years. I worked in a hedge fund. I worked in insurance. I did all kinds of things. And then I did a lot of entrepreneurial work as well. And in 2013, I ended up back in LA, and I came when it was Silicon Beach in LA, so around 2012. But in 2013, I joined one of the very, very earliest crowdfunding platforms, real estate crowdfunding platforms, and I joined essentially as a founder. So I was employee number one, and that really plunged me into the real estate side of investing, which intuitively I understood. I owned 2 apartments, just single apartments of condos, I guess. Because I knew that would be a good investment, but it's not what we're taught. It's not what we did at the hedge fund. It's not what we did at the bank. Right. So for the past 7 years, I've been in the fintech space, in the real estate crowdfunding space. And a couple of years ago, I joined this private equity firm, Alpha Investing, and we're bringing institutional quality commercial real estate through syndication to our network. And so now we're in this portfolio building phase of different kinds of assets, including apartment communities. So that's a super quick of where I started. And the interesting thread around it all to me is when I was that young 18-year-old, I thought I'd be in a power suit with a briefcase working in a big city. Sure. And I work from home kind of wherever I want. And I have everything I wanted, but without all the fancy stuff that I thought needed to go with it. like the city life and the suits and all of that kind of stuff. And so it was a really cool realization a couple years ago. And I said, you actually made it to what you said you wanted, like the financial independence and the freedom and doing important work and also helping other people. Because to me, the financial empowerment for myself and for others, right? So it's really cool to look back on it all and see how I started and where I'm at today.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And I think that's a great distinction because, we live in a environment today. I don't want to really use the word culture because we have so many different cultures here in the United States, but we live in really an environment where we have so much opportunity that I think unless you get absolutely clear on how you want to live your life, you get pulled in so many different directions, especially here in this country, right? So I really understand and can appreciate what you said about really it's about getting clear on what you want and then designing a life that reflects that. Because here in the United States, we have the ability to do that, right? And I think it's just about, for one, I think it's really difficult to appreciate how amazing this country is unless you travel outside of it. Because
100%.
Yeah, this is not normal, right? Most people think this is normal. This is not normal for maybe 80% of the people in the world, maybe 90. This is not normal. And so I don't think you can really appreciate the liberties that we have here until you travel outside of it. But then when you come back, to your point, now you can start really redefining or defining for that matter, how you want to live your life and start to pursue that forward, right? So it sounds like you've been able to do that. So I'm going to pivot and ask a couple more questions, okay? Because I really appreciate that. So talk about your book. I think that would be a really great segue based on what we just talked about to maybe expand on the topic of your book a little bit. And then we'll talk about some other things. But could you kind of share your book and maybe the reason for you writing that or how that came to be and the overall philosophy behind the book?
Yeah. So ever since I was a little girl, I wanted to write a book. Like I wanted to be a writer. But sorry, my green mustache from drinking my green smoothie. Sorry about that. Good.
So I'm going to be doing this. Go ahead, please. Sorry about that.
No. So I wanted to write ever since I was little. I loved writing. But again, when I hit that age, when I had to make a career decision, so to speak, right? That I didn't really think I could do anything with the writing part, but I've always been good at it and it served me really well in business. Yeah, I do a lot of like marketing and copy and writing in general. And so I love it anyway. I never thought I would write a book about intuition. It's not what maybe I had in mind as, a bushy-eyed, kind of a girl. But what it comes down to is over my career, over my lifetime, I've had a lot of things go right and I've had a lot of things go wrong. And
I call that life.
Right? It's life. I know, but I want to get to the bottom of it, right? I want to get to the bottom of why do these things sort of quote unquote happen? And I kind of landed on, a lot of the times when things went wrong, so to speak, was I didn't listen to my intuition and it was speaking very clearly and very loudly to me. And intuition is also my inner voice, right? It's that part of me that's like, don't do that. That's a bad idea. And I didn't listen. And then those were always the times when something went really wrong and I'd be really angry. And so I really broke it down. I tried to understand, how do I get in touch with that voice in a consistent way? Because like you said, we're trying to design a life, but if we're designing a life based on what other people tell us and not what we inside of ourselves really truly want, like unless we align to our own values, our own authority, like our own power, we're just simply going to live somebody else's life. And so the book is an exploration through a lot of science because, you say intuition and a lot of people be like, yeah, I don't know about that. That's, that's for psychics. That's kind of like woo. I don't really believe it. And that was me to a degree too, because it wasn't rational enough. And so I really break it down because I want to understand how this body, how this mind, how we're biologically built for it. And so I dig into that in the book because I really want people to understand that they can trust themselves.
Okay, so that's a really, really good point. All right, and I'm gonna expand upon that, because in the world of business, one of the ways I think to make this conversation real for our audience, so that's what we're gonna do. Let's make it real, right? So that people can attach themselves to this and figure out how to apply this stuff forward. Right? Is in the business world, what's really commonly heard or discussed when you talk about intuition is gut. Right? Trust your gut. Trust your instincts. Extraordinarily common in business, happens all the time, happens every day. It's just a part of who we do or what we do and who we are in the world of business, right? But how we define what that looks like, very, very different. Now, I do agree with you. There are some people that are a lot more in tune to their intuition than others, right? And so, and people define this very differently. Okay, I've heard this defined in many, many different ways. From right, the voice, your gut, God speaking to you, right? I think what's really important here is to understand that you have authority, right? So the way that you describe that, I think that's the basis, right? We've been given authority, and the greatest gift that we've been given, no matter what your background is the gift of free will, to be able to make decisions, right? That's our greatest gift, okay? And massive gift, but I think the opportunity is being willing to exercise that on a consistent basis, right? And not giving that up to other people to make our decisions. And when we give that up, at least in my own experience, I can only speak with my own experiences, that's when we can no longer hear our intuition or that voice, right? Because we're no longer exercising that authority. So, all right, with that said, so can you give an example so that we can start making this tangible for our audience, so that it's not this fluffy thing that's floating around out there, but rather we want to maybe give some context to this so that the audience that we have listening, that they can start maybe implementing some of these ideas or skills to start making better decisions. Because in the world of real estate investing, okay, it's all about decision making. One of the things that I tell my staff is doing nothing is not a decision. Okay, I'd rather you make a decision and make a mistake, and we adjust and figure out what the learning from that is. But doing nothing is not a decision, right? And I think oftentimes that's the biggest factor for running into challenge, is ignoring, right, the things that we actually need to do. And it starts with a decision. So with that being said, can you provide an example? Because this is actually a really good topic, something I know a little bit about.
Yeah. Well, I always say, you're not going to underwrite with your gut, right? We're not underwriting with our gut, but we want to do like a gut check, and then we do a fact check, right? When we're underwriting properties and making investment decisions, we have to look at the data. Always. Data can also be interpreted, right? Because we also have all these like biases, and this is what happens. We have these like filters almost, but like blinders when we really want something. Like I really want that to work. And so you'll like change, you'll change the sensitivity analysis by like that 1 percentage point just so you can get it. And so there's an element where it's like, do you understand the motivation behind why you're doing something? And like, that's that knowing yourself, right? And your intuition in this sense for the business side of it is the gut is, when we're making investments, we're also investing with people. And this is the most important part. What is your gut? What is your body? What do your emotions say about that person? Most importantly, do you trust them? Because your body and your mind, we're wired for this. Our body receives tens of millions of bits of data per second, and our conscious mind can only process 7. So we are actually receiving all this data constantly that we're not conscious of. So plus, we have these unconscious biases that are playing out. So it's really important. If you have a literal gut reaction, you don't feel good around somebody, explore it. It doesn't mean you're gonna like trash a deal because you got like a bad feeling about somebody, but you might want to explore a little bit more as to why you have that feeling and do it. Like I tell this story. I lost $250,000 to investment fraud. And I didn't listen to my gut, and my whole body and a whole lot of other things, because I really wanted this to be real and true. And I just pushed all of the intuitive stuff aside. And I was like, no, I'm going to make it work. Like me and my ego and everything I had to prove. And there you go.
Okay. So I'm going to challenge you a little bit. Okay.
Okay.
So cause I hear this, I've heard this before. And so my question is, but were there other signs there that you just ignored, right? Other facts, maybe is a better way to ask the question, that you ignored because you wanted, right, to believe that, hey, this was probably the best opportunity. Because usually hindsight's always 20/20. So I'm not going to sit here and be a critic. As my dad used to say, his comment was always very easy to be a critic when you're playing from the sidelines, right? So fortunately, we're not playing from the sidelines. But the point there being is, were there other signs? So when you look back on that experience, what were the signs now that you can pull a learning lesson out of and say, okay, you know what, for my audience out there, my investors out there, here's what I learned. And in hindsight, these are the signs that I saw that I just either wasn't as in tune with as I am today, right? So what were those signs?
Yeah. And that's part of it, right? Is that unconscious bias, and that you're not really listening and you're not noticing the other signs. Cause it's not just intuitive. It's also complete, we have 188 unconscious biases. So we're playing with a lot of material there that wants things to be a certain way and is not really seeing reality. And for years, as I was going through this, I held myself in a lot of shame because I was supposed to be smarter than that. All the things that I was supposed to be. And so when I look back on it now, I realize I did my due diligence. And there are signs when the signs, honestly, for me really come down to, I didn't really trust what this person was saying. And I couldn't find a rational reason, because when I did my due diligence, it checked out. And so I used the facts to justify why I was just, being scared or whatever. And a really important thing is that this person used a lot of psychological mechanisms against me.
Such as? What would be an example of that?
Like when I had doubts and I was like, hey, I'm not really sure about this. He would pull things like, I have more important things to do and more important people to talk to, and sort of made me feel less than.
I call that the takeaway close.
Okay.
That's the takeaway.
What's that?
Close. Yeah, very common. It's when someone, and so funny story, this happened to me once and I laughed. I can hear it all the time now in conversations, right? But it's when someone, they sell you, and then they take away, right? Because human nature, our tendency is to want what we can't have. And so it's very common. And I hear it all the time in conversations every day when I'm interacting with people and in conversations. But anyways, I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying completely. Yeah. So,
and so you have to be really careful, because that happens. And when I talk about intuition, I'm really fundamentally talking about this inner authority. If I was more sure of myself and trusted myself more to walk away, because it requires, I think, a lot more confidence and a lot more strength,
certainty,
to walk away.
Yeah.
Than to, you play it out. So look, there's 1,000 lessons in there, but for me personally, the most important one was I noticed all the ways that I allowed this person to sort of use these tactics against me.
Right.
And I didn't listen to my inner voice, and that was saying something's really wrong about this. And I couldn't put my finger on it, and I couldn't find facts to back it up, because I was referencing things from my own experience and people I had worked with that counteracted any of the sort of rational things that were well, this isn't possible that this could possibly work. It was a private equity investment, not real estate. But I knew people, and too, a lot of big deals with big returns are not the ones that the everyday person knows about.
Of course.
And I had a whole bunch of experience there. And so I was like, no, this can make sense to me. but I was just using that to justify what I really wanted and not listening. And I wasn't listening. And then the other thing is that, and this is a huge one for me, I didn't ask for help. I really wanted to do this all on my own.
That's a big one, right?
Huge. Pride, my good friend pride.
Yeah, that's a big one. And I think, gosh, when I heard you say that, it made me reflect on, some of my own limitations, because I can tell you this, that some of my biggest barriers personally have been to that effect. Me not, in many cases, not knowing how to reach out, but also just not reaching out, right?
Yeah.
There's no perfect way to reach out. It's just, picking up the phone or sending an email and just reaching out. So I think that's a really big one, but it also, in my mind, helps validate how you've grown, because that's not something easy to admit to, right? Like, hey, man, I just didn't reach out and ask for help. It's for someone else to validate what I was thinking or what I am thinking, right? Because it's not easy to do that. And I think once you can acknowledge things like that, it shows massive growth. And I think that's when your life starts to change. I can speak to me. For me, investing took on a whole different world when I started being really intentional about bringing people into my life that were much smarter than me. And I had to pay money to do that, right? Meaning joining different associations with investors that were 40 years to my senior, right? That were 30 years older than I was, right? 70 years old, 65 years old, some older than that, but that were deal makers. I mean, these are lifetime deal makers, right? I learned so much there in a short amount of time. And a lot of it was just how they thought about putting together transactions. Mm-hmm. But then guess what? Now that circle now has expanded. So now when I have a question about something, I can just reach out to them, right?
Yeah.
And that made a huge difference. And for me, investing took on a whole different world, because now I got exposed to this very different world that I didn't know existed. And so it helped me construct, and it helps me construct deals very differently than probably a lot of people out there, right? But I had to learn that from other people. And so I totally get that. I think that's a really big one for audience, which is why I wanted to elaborate on that, because man, huge, right? Yeah. It's just really, really huge. Okay. So now let's pivot a little bit and talk about why that's so important in private equity, the world of private equity, right? How can we use intuition? And I think you said something that I kind of resonated with me as well, certainty to make decisions around private equity, right? Because in this world, in our space, there's debt and there's equity, and we need both to make things work, but we also need the certainty to be able to make decisions, yes or no decisions, right? Not maybe, yes or no. Okay. Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and this one is maybe less on the intuition side, and it goes a little bit more to the help side, because
let's do that.
Yeah, because like my team, my partners, we underwrite, and one of the partners is like, her main job is to be the underwriter, and that is her, like, that's her job, and that's her expertise, that's her area of expertise. And so everything, every question, every metric, everything gets run through her rather. And it really takes a team to make investments. I mean, it takes a team to do anything. I mean, you can do certain things on your own, but it takes a team. Like, I am not the underwriter. Anne is the underwriter. And her expertise, far surpasses anybody else's. And you're making decisions based on facts. And, we always talk about the way we do due diligence. There's also these intangibles, which gets really interesting because it kind of goes into this kind of intuitive space, if you will. And the intangibles are always around people. When we work with our sponsors, so we work with a sponsor, with an operator, how they answer questions, how transparent they are, how forthcoming. There's a lot of intangibles that play a role that aren't necessarily intuitive per se, but they do speak to character. And that is a consideration along with track record, along with the existing portfolio, along with like multiple other things. So, when you're thinking about investing, I would also say know your limitations, know what you're good at, know your limitations. Like you said, you brought people on to help you do the things that you couldn't do yet, potentially. And so, this is the piece in business where I think when you know your limitation and you might know your weaknesses, you go to someone else for that piece. And
Right.
that's another way that's a decision. That's a decision to say, you know what? This is like over my head. I don't know. Or I have a question about this that I'm not equipped to answer. And so I go find the answers from somebody who is equipped to answer that question. And that's me and my own team. So when we work with our investors, I always say, like, your questions are all valid. I don't expect you to know anything. So please don't be shy to ask. Because another thing is if you as an investor are asking questions of somebody and they're pertinent and valid and very important to what you are trying to accomplish when you're investing money, if they try to do that shady business of like, taking away the close or acting like they're too important and your question, like if you have a question, then you're like lesser than, those moves. I just personally at this point in my life, like that's just not somebody I want to work with. They might have a great deal, but if they won't give me what I need to feel comfortable, that's not a person I want to work with.
Right. So, the world of private equity is a very interesting world, right? And it's constantly evolving, especially with all these new regulations that are coming down. I think many for the better. But I know that this space is going to continue to evolve because now, we have legislation that's being explored to be able to open up private equity to more people. Yep. So I know this is going to be an area that's going to be constantly evolving. So that's why I think this is a really, really good topic, right? It's a great topic, something that is very relevant and will continue to evolve over the next probably 5 years or so, right? 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
So with that being said, talk a little bit about, the investments that you're making right now. You talk about how this platform is really designed to help investors make investments into institutional grade opportunities. So can you define what that means so that our audience has an idea of what does institutional grade mean, right?
Yeah.
And then how do you help facilitate that?
Yeah, thank you. So the way we define institutional grade is going to be working with sponsors or operators who've been doing what they've been doing for 10 to 15 years at a minimum and have done at least $500 million of transactions or have like acquisitions in AUM. And a lot of our sponsors have a couple billion or more. And these are going to be sponsors who you would individually have to write a 7-figure check to even like sit down and invest with them. So it's sponsors that are doing larger scale projects. This is in the multifamily, in the senior living space, affordable housing space as well. And we look opportunistically at other asset classes, but those are the big ones. Because a lot of people like the idea of the returns, but they don't, as you know, like to do the direct management, is a lot of work for a lot of people. And it's not mutually exclusive, like to be an active and a passive investor. But what we do is we offer a passive investment opportunity into a level of project that a lot of people wouldn't want to be personally managing, and also access to these kinds of institutional grade sponsors that they're not posting on LinkedIn. They're very private, they're under the radar, and they like it that way. And so we're a lot more discreet as well in like our whole approach. So we facilitate the transaction, we aggregate capital, we make the investment, we set up the LLC rather, and, we facilitate the transaction and the reporting and the distributions back to our investors.
Got it. Okay. So I think there's definitely opportunity with institutional grade investments. Okay. But I think one of the greatest advantages with private equity, especially how legislation has changed and is changing now, is that it allows for more people that typically don't have access to that type of exclusive network to be able to participate in more opportunities that are more tangible to them, right?
Yeah.
For example, I'll give you a really good example. A great example of that is now, if let's use like a local real estate club, okay? And let's use one in San Diego, since I'm based out of San Diego. Okay. Or no, let's use you as an example. Okay, say you have you and your friends get together every Friday for coffee, right? You and your girlfriends, all right? So you have 20, maybe 30 people. You get together every Friday. You have conversations about different investment opportunities. Heck, you have conversations about family and everything else in between, right? Between family and investment opportunities, because that's how this stuff really goes down. All right. So then one day someone says, hey, look, I've been working on this amazing idea, and let me run it by you. Well, coincidentally or fortunately, you have 30 people there that you can run the idea by, right? And say out of the 30 people, 15 people raise their hand and say, you know what? That's a great idea. How do you intend on capitalizing that, right? And when do you intend on getting this going? And then you say, you know what? It's funny that you ask. It's funny that you ask, because I'd be very open to partnering with you or one or two or three or all of you for that matter. Let's talk about that. So now with the new securities laws, it puts you in a position where you can actually form a private placement, raise money, and go out there and actually implement this, right? And start building out a business, a concept, an idea, and turning it into a viable, profitable business. Now, here's the argument, right? The argument is, okay, John, well, I get that. That's fine and dandy. That's great. But I think my money is safer with institutional level investors, okay? Because they have more experience. My money may not be at risk as much. Okay. On this side, however, right, you're taking on more risk, right? May not be as experienced. And these are questions that come about, okay? But I think the missing element really gets back to your ability to make decisions, right? Qualify what you're doing, right? And then move forward on that basis. But I think ultimately, the reason why private equity is such a great opportunity, because it allows us to be able to take action on opportunities, okay, based on our own experiences, right? Things that are relevant to us that we can associate with, because, I too had a investment experience, and this is when I was much younger, in the stock market, and I lost a bunch of money, okay? And fortunately, I was young enough then to be able to recreate that. But the point there being is, what I quickly realized after that happened is I don't have the same level of access that $1 billion hedge fund does, okay? That's right. Or a $2 billion hedge fund does. I just don't have the same level of access. They could put someone on the board. The level of information that passes between a $1 to $2 billion hedge fund, very different than what I had access to, right? So the transparency was not there for me. And it's not there for 90% of the people out there, truly, right? But what I did come to realize really quickly, that in real estate, okay, it was a much level playing field because the markets are a lot more inefficient. So it gave me the opportunity to actually use my brain and make decisions based on what I could see, right? So in other words, the markets are just a lot more transparent. Okay. And so that's why I dove in. And once I made that correlation, I said, okay, I can totally influence the outcomes of these investments, whereas I cannot influence the outcomes of large institutional grade investment. Very difficult to influence unless I had a couple $1 billion, right? Or maybe probably could do that with about $500 million, or maybe even like $300 million, right? I probably could start influencing in that case. But with $300 million, I can place that in my own investments and do much better anyway. So anyways, the point there being is that I'm just trying to provide a couple of different vantage points for our audience to be able to look at this. not right or wrong, it just is, right? And so a couple of different viewpoints for people to be able to look at this through and compare the pros and the cons, and again, make decisions with, right? So anyways, with that being said, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, and I might not have been clear on this, but we use those same mechanisms. So we bring that institutional grade investment opportunity to a larger group of people. So our minimum investment is $25,000 in what would normally be $1 million or more.
Gotcha.
So, and like I said, when I, basically helped launch real estate crowdfunding as an industry, we were working with 506C. And at Alpha, we're working on the 506B. Sometimes we do 506C for our funds. It really depends. We haven't gone the full, Reg CF or Regulation A. It's just not in our business model. But we take sort of the best of these both worlds. We take the access piece and we make it available to a lot more people. So what we're doing is using those exact mechanisms to bring these institutional sponsors that you would otherwise have to write a 7-figure check to have, even just to invest with them with no influence. But we take the position of working with the sponsor. And so ours is far more passive because not everybody wants to make the decision. Not everybody wants the control piece. Some people just want the passive piece, and they want to trust an entity like ours to do the control piece and to do the due diligence piece and to do, the negotiating piece. And that's really what we're doing. So those mechanisms are amazing. I've been in the crowdfunding industry since almost the very, very beginning. So it's an amazing opportunity, and everyone can use it in a slightly different way.
Sure,
and you mentioned it. One of the best things about it is the transparency piece is bringing that transparency to the investors. And that's a function of who's doing it too, because there's plenty of people that use, some parts of the Jobs Act and are still not being transparent. So if, so it comes down to how are you diligencing the people you're investing with? Because they should be able to answer your questions and be transparent. And that's a big value of ours as a firm, is that transparency piece and the sharing of the due diligence and the answering of the questions, and educating our investors on what is this and what should you be looking for, so that they're making informed decisions, which is better for everybody in the long term.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. One of the things that I have really come to value over the years, we started this company in 2008. So we've been doing this for a while now, right? Yeah. But one of the things that I've really come to appreciate over the years is all of the investors that started with me in 2008, they're still with me now.
Amazing.
And of course, we've grown beyond the folks that started with us then. So now we have close to about 200 investors that have been with us for quite some time, right? But one of the things that I really value today is I know everyone. And for the most part, I know all of their kids. And I've seen kids, and many of them put their kids through with our investments, right? My very first partner, by the way, was my CPA.
I love it.
My very first partner in 2008. Investor was my CPA, right? Mm-hmm. And he's been able to put his kids through some very good schools and he's done extraordinarily well. Yeah. But that's one of the things that I've come to really appreciate, is being able to really know the people that I'm helping to build wealth with, right? Yeah. That's huge for me, very big. If you were to ask me that in 2008, there's no way I would be able to answer that or understand that. But when you can positively impact people that way, and you can get to know them on a personal level doing that, I think it's huge. And I think it makes what we do a lot more enjoyable and meaningful and more purpose-driven, right?
Yes.
And it also, I think, ties us as a company to our projects with a different sense of urgency, because I know these folks, personally. They're very different, very different. Now, at some point, we're going to continue to grow and, of course, expand. But our priority is to maintain those relationships. And I think with technology today, very unique opportunity. We're able to do that, right? We're able to do that. And so huge opportunity, I think. And I think it's something that's maybe undervalued a little bit, right? Because I think the idea is as you scale, you lose touch with your clients. And I want to create the inverse of that, where as we scale, we still find ways to really know the people that we're doing business with. And there are a lot of ways to do that, right? Vacations, which, man, we take a lot of joint vacations with our folks. Just a lot of different ways to do that. Even hikes, the craziest thing. Who would have known? So out of COVID has come hiking with people that we do business with, and just the greatest thing. But those are the little intangible things that I think it's really difficult to duplicate and create when you're investing with $1 billion company, right? It's almost impossible. Mm-hmm. Not that there aren't great opportunities, but I just think the things that are really meaningful in life, you can actually combine, right? Building relationships and creating massive profits. You can combine the two, and you can combine many other things with that as well. But anyways, that's something that we're really focused on doing here. But I just wanted to comment on that because of some of the things that you said. How do you keep, we're towards the end of our show right now, but how do you maintain those relationships, right? I mean, what do you do to help maintain the communication, the relationship aspect?
We have really similar values. Our investor network isn't huge, and we're on a first name basis with all of our investors. Anybody who wants to invest with us has to first have a phone call with us. It's our network is built on referral and recommendation. So, everybody who comes to us comes through referral or recommendation. And so we get to know people, and we give out our cell phones. We don't have a 1-800 number. We don't have like a chat bot on our website. So we have this, I always tell people this.
You said that, a chat bot. That's pretty funny.
So I haven't necessarily gone on hikes with any of my investors, but and before COVID, we were doing a lot of investor networking events where we were bringing investors together, constantly staying in touch. And some people want to stay in touch and some people don't. And so it just really depends, but it really is that value of we're looking for long-term relationships, and we do this with our sponsors and we do this with our investors. And for us, the most important thing is that our investors understand that they can always get a hold of us, and not to be shy to ask a question ever. We do quarterly reporting, and that's all well and good. But if somebody has a question, we're going to get back to them. If they need to get on the phone, we're going to get on the phone. And then once people can mingle again, we'll do our investor networking events again and get back to it. But a lot of our investors are friends and family and colleagues, and similar to you. That's how it started. And so we have this very interesting mix of people that invest with us, and people come to us for different reasons, as they do to you. And but I 100% agree. It's building that relationship is important, because you don't want somebody sitting there wondering whether they can reach out, or they're worried about something and they don't think they can get a hold of you. That's the worst place to be in as an investor, is feeling like that entity is too far removed from me, but my money is important to me. So,
sure.
Yeah.
Well, hey, I really appreciate that. Well, we're at the end of our show, and I want to thank you for being such a great guest. This has been a really cool conversation, very unique, right? In that, we talk about intuition and how to be able to leverage intuition to make better decisions when making investments. And I do believe that there's, an opportunity there to do that. But I also recognize that it starts with having certainty within ourselves, right? To be able to either be a yes or be a no, and not live in the world of maybe. And the world of maybe always creates problems. So I want to thank you for being an amazing guest. Before I ask you to share how our audience can get in touch with you, what is the one question that you have of me that you think can add some value to our audience? Since I've been asking you questions for a good 40 minutes. Right?
I would say a question for you is, 12 years into this,
Right.
you're in your second sort of quote unquote crisis. What are some words of advice for somebody who's thinking maybe a little shorter term, like I'm freaking out, it's a crisis? What would you say to somebody who might not have that longer view? What would you say to sort of make them not necessarily feel better, but just put them at ease?
Yeah, sure. Well, yeah, I think the big thing is, and I can only speak to my experiences, right? So I'm going to speak to my own experiences, and maybe, people can take some things out of this. But one of the big things that I've learned over the years is be patient, right? I mean, no one ever complained when they didn't lose any money, right? No one complains when they don't lose money, right?
Yeah.
So be patient, because oftentimes we have this tendency to want to take action because we hear that we should. Mm-hmm. And I've learned over the years that going in the opposite direction of the masses, right? When the masses are making a left, I find a way to make a hard right. And that served me well over many, many years. So being patient is a really big one, right? Don't feel the need to take action if you don't have clarity. The other thing too is I think that we're in a great market right now because you have indecision, right? And anytime you have indecision, you have a market, meaning you have opportunity. So if everybody was saying, hey, look, if you had 80% of the world saying this is going to be an amazing investment opportunity, I always step back and start questioning that, right? Because that means there really is no opportunity if everyone's chasing that. Well, in this market right now, 50% of the people are saying that it's amazing, and the other 50 are saying it's not. And I'm thinking, okay, this is awesome, because when you have indecision, you have an amazing opportunity to discover and find opportunity, right? It just takes more work and it takes more effort.
Yeah.
Okay. And so that's number two. The third thing that I've learned since 2008 is don't live in the world of maybe. Okay. Do not live in the world of maybe. It's either a yes or a no. And if it's a no, then be good with that. There are probably 4 deals to date that when I look back on, I go, you know what, those are amazing opportunities. And I passed on them. And if I did not pass on them, they would be worth significant amounts of money, right? Mm-hmm. One of them was a block in downtown San Diego. I'm not going to get into that story, but that property would be worth probably $20 million by now. Okay. And at the time I had it in escrow for maybe $1.5 million. I think it was $1.5 million or $1.8 million. Okay. Kind of a unique story, but the point there being is, maybe not. Yeah, probably about 20, maybe 15 million. But the point there being is, don't live in the world of maybe. And I'm speaking to myself saying this, not to the audience, right? Is John, don't live in the world of maybe. It's either a yes or a no, and be good with that place. But when you make a yes decision, you have to be fully committed to it. You have to be all in, because living in the world of maybe, again, being partially committed to something will produce a partial result, right?
Yep.
And my partial results have never been the same as when I'm fully committed to something, all in, irrespective of what's going on around me, right? That's always served me really, really well. And inside of that place, I've made some really big mistakes too, very costly mistakes, but I've learned from that. And so the last thing that I could suggest to people, okay, myself first, is there's no fail, there's only learn, right? If you're really committed to doing that, if you're committed to learning, and then, use yourself as a case study, man. Be willing to use yourself as a case study, right? Mm-hmm. Instead of constantly wanting to reach out and inquire with other people all the time, be willing to look at things, assess the risk, and be willing to be your own case study, because it's going to serve you much more than if you took that money and you paid someone else to give you advice that ultimately you need to experience for yourself to get the real benefit from that, right? And so that would be my 5. So hopefully that helps.
I think those are, they're helpful. I think they're really important. And the failure is learn. I always say, you can redefine failure as feedback. It's still an F. Just change the word. And
yeah, for sure. For sure. I think it's really important, right? Because, the other side of this too is that it took me some time to figure this out. When I was younger, I wasn't a very good student. When I got into college, I was a really good student. Okay. But I became a really good learner out of college. Okay. And then what I realized is that learning is a skill. And once I figured that out, once I figured out that learning is a skill, meaning something that you constantly can evolve and shift, and it's constantly evolving, right? But knowing how to learn is an absolute skill. You can teach yourself how to learn. Right? No one's born like an amazing learner. In fact, most people are really good students, but not very good life learners. Okay, and I wasn't either for a really long time. But once I figured out that learning was a skill, then I had to start teaching myself how to learn, right? And so the benefit of doing that is when we put ourselves in positions that are challenging, we always know that you're going to be able to move through it, right? You're always going to be able to find and get to the finish line. And that's what I tell myself. I go, okay, hey, look, this is an amazing opportunity. I know it's going to be difficult, but I will always find a way to the finish line. And I think that's a huge opportunity, and one that I really believe is undervalued, right? And so, in fact, I would call that really the greatest opportunity inside of the space, right? So, yeah. So, hey, thanks so much for being on the show. I'm so grateful, for you, and I'm really excited for your future success.
Thank you.
And maybe we can do some work together. I'll reach out and have a conversation with you, and we'll see where it goes.
Sounds good.
Okay. So how do people get in touch with you?
Yeah, well, the beauty of my name is that it's so unique that you can just Google me and I'll come up. So I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, so you can find me on LinkedIn. My company is Alpha Investing, alphai.com. But really, I'm really out to just get to know people and connect. This is not about me gaining investors. It's really just me being able to connect with people and be helpful. And that's really what my book is about. And so if you're interested in the book, you can go to productiveintuition.com or my website if you want to see a little bit more about my leadership work and the facilitation and the empowerment work that I do. That's Adapia D'Errico.com. And then Instagram for the fun stuff, because that's where I hang out there. Of course.
Hey, well, again, thank you so much for being on. You've been a tremendous guest. I want to wish you continued success, and I will talk to you soon.
Likewise. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Clarity of purpose creates our greatest competitive advantage. When we transform apartment buildings to thriving communities, we improve how people live and create assets with high profit margins. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this up with a friend. I'm John Brackett, bringing you things you can implement right away.